Note, all characters, events, and spoken words in this story are fictional, and is not meant to target any specific audience. Feel free to stop reading at any time and read at your own risk. Xiao Xues woke up as usual, and began her daily routine as she hummed away. The children were still asleep as they had stayed up fairly late playing around last night, but Xiao Xues was glad they had fun. Xiao Xues happily began to plan out the rest of the day for her children, but she didn't realize her impending doom was soon to come on this normal day. It was almost noon when the children were about to wake up. Xiao Xues had finished preparing lunch, and had sat down in the front garden of the orphanage as she hummed away like usual, waiting for the children to smell the food and wake up. The orphanage rarely gets any visitors, let alone at the ungodly lunch hour where everyone would visit a dining place instead of an orphanage. However, an untimely visitor decided to barge into the orphanage today. While Xiao Xues was humming away, a hoarse voice resounded from the front gate of the orphanage. "Anyone home?" Xiao Xues was curious who the voice belonged to as it sounded a bit familiar, but Xiao Xues couldn't seem to remember who it belongs to. Xiao Xues got up and headed to the front gate where she saw a suspicious individual, dressed in a black robe with a black hoodie, holding a wooden basket filled with apples. Although Xiao Xues wanted to ignore whoever it was and tell them to go away, when Xiao Xues saw the suspicious individual look up, she failed to control the kind side of her heart. Under the hood was an extremely wrinkly face with a few strands of white hair peeking out from under the hood. When Xiao Xues saw such an old granny, her kindness took over as she couldn't bear to ignore the old granny wait. Xiao Xues then gently asked, "Hello granny, how may I help you?" The granny's face seemed to distort in anger for a moment, however it quickly recovered to normal so fast that Xiao Xues didn't notice it. The granny then chuckled before saying hoarsely, "Well dear, it seems you run an orphanage here, and I happened to pass by. I have just bought too many apples from the market, and it's a bit too heavy for me to carry them all back. Hence, I was wondering if you would be so kind to take some of them for me. Take it as a gift for the children of the orphanage." Xiao Xues stared back in a daze for a bit as if she was processing what was being said. After seeing the so many wicked people in her life, she had a hard time believing a random stranger would come to an orphanage just to donate some apples. However, she remembered the kind old granny who took care of her. When she associated that granny with the granny in front of her, her vigilance relaxed. However, Xiao Xues always ensures that the food she gives to her children are from a safe source as she doesn't want to risk harming the children. Hence, she never takes outside sources of food from them. Instead, the groceries are usually timely delivered by the rich family who owned the orphanage. Although it seemed that rich family didn't care for the orphanage, there was at least someone from that family who still spared some time to take care of the orphanage. As for who it was, Xiao Xues had a small suspicion but she wasn't sure. In the end, Xiao Xues still came to the conclusion of denying the apples. "Granny, I must apologize. I don't take food from the market to feed the children as I don't know about their conditions." After Xiao Xues' polite refusal, the old granny was quiet for a bit as she frowned. Not long after, she put on a pitiful face as she persuaded, "Young miss, please take pity on this lady who can't carry heavy things too far. This lady will not do you any harm. I can guarantee these apples in the basket are fresh from the market, and should have no problems. If you don't believe me, you can try one yourself." The granny then reached into the basket and pulled out a glistening red apple that was near perfection. It looked so fresh and good that it was too good to be true. The granny then attempted to hand the apple to Xiao Xues. Xiao Xues wanted to refuse once more, however, the granny interrupted her as she demanded, "Take it. Don't let this lady's frail hands hold it any longer." Seeing the granny's shaking hands, Xiao Xues' kindness took over as she gently took the apple out of the granny's hand. It was then that Xiao Xues noticed that the granny's hand seemed to have no wrinkles. However, the hand was quickly hidden back into the robe, causing Xiao Xues to be confused as she didn't know if what she saw was real. Her jumbled thoughts were interrupted as the granny commanded, "Try it. Eat it now. I guarantee you will have a beautiful sleep tonight after eating it. Don't make this granny stand here too long." Although Xiao Xues found the situation to be a bit queer, her kindness didn't allow her to make a granny wait too long. Hence, she took a bite into the apple. As Xiao Xu was distracted, the bite she took was a bit too large, but she didn't realize it. As Xiao Xu was about to chew and swallow the piece of apple in her mouth, she was distracted as she heard a crazy cackle from in front of her that caused her to swallow the piece without chewing it. Finally, I have come personally to make sure nothing goes wrong, and now I shall succeed, the granny cackled, but her voice was no longer hoarse. Xiao Xu found the voice very familiar as she definitely knew that voice, but before she could think further, Xiao Xu had a hard time breathing. The glistening apple slipped out of her hands and rolled off as it revealed the bitten portion to be pitch black. Xiao Xu reached her hands to her throat as she tried to gasp for air but to no avail. Not long after, Xiao Xu began to feel dizzy as her legs began to weaken. As her view began to fade out to black, all Xiao Xu could hear was the crazy cackle in front of her. She finally recognized that the voice belonged to her evil stepmother, but it was far too late. Now, I shall be the fairest of all in this land. Ah ha 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 ha, the evil stepmother cackled as she strolled off to a car parked nearby. The car then drove off as the orphanage descended into silence once more. It was not long after that the front door of the garden was opened as a child bumbled out while rubbing his eyes sleepily. "Big sis, is it time to eat?" the child called out in a cute voice, but he was met with no response. The child then looked around and discovered that Xiao Xu was lying motionless on the ground. The child was shocked before crying out in horror, "Big sis." The child then ran up to Xiao Xu and began shaking her intensely, hoping to wake her up, but to no avail. He began to wail loudly by her side, not knowing what to do. This woke the other children up as they rushed out to the garden as well. A couple of the children began to wail loudly as they called for their big sis who had taken good care of them, but their big sis was already sleeping peacefully on the ground. It was then that the oldest one's eyes sparkled with brilliance before he ran back into the orphanage. He went to find a phone and rapidly dialed a number that a certain kind stranger who he met had gave him. Not long after, the call connected as a mellow voice resounded, "Who's this?" "Be big brother, it's me. You told me to call you if anything happens." "Be big sis, she won't wake up," the child said into the phone before tears began to roll down his face. Not long after, he began to wail as well. The phone was silent for a while before a hoarse voice resounded, "Meeting adjourned." Then, the call disconnected. It may seem like a long time to the children, but it wasn't even 10 minutes before a roaring engine resounded as a car came to a screech in front of the orphanage. The door then quickly opened as a handsome, tall man in a tuxedo suit rapidly got out of the car without even turning the engine off. He then vaulted over the gate as he quickly walked up to Xiao Xu who was lying on the ground. He then commanded, "Kids, off to the side. Let Big Brother see if he can save your big sis." It seems some of the kids recognized the big brother as they hurriedly nodded and pulled the others away. The handsome man took a glance at Xiao Xu's throat and then tore off his tie as he quickly knelt down next to the pale Xiao Xu. He gently caressed her face as he said, "Xiao Xu, I won't let you die." Gently embracing Xiao Xu, the handsome man stood up with Xiao Xu's body leaning against his. Then, he performed a couple of abdominal thrusts on Xiao Xu. After that, he took another glance at Xiao Xu's throat as he nodded to himself and gently laid Xiao Xu back on the ground face up. After that, the handsome man smiled gently as he took a deep breath and placed his hands on Xiao Xu's chest to give it a few compressions before leaning his face in. The soft lips of Xiao Xu then made contact with the handsome man's lips as the children hurried covered their eyes with their hands while secretly peeking out through their fingers. After what seemed to be a long time, the handsome man finally seemed to have enough as he raised his face once more. He then turned his face to the side and spitted out a piece of apple. He then gently smiled as he turned back to glance at Xiao Xu, who had color returning to her pale face. A smirk gradually formed on his face as he declared, "One kiss doesn't seem to be enough. Since you're not waking up, I guess I have no choice, Tilda." The young man then intended to lean in for another kiss, but Xiao Xu's eyes snapped open as a faint blush appeared on her face. "Xiao Wank. You dare?" "Of course I dare," Xiao Wank replied cheekily before diving in and giving Xiao Xu a quick peck on her lips. Xiao Zhu blushed furiously as she heard the children giggle beside her, but alas, she didn't have the strength to get up as she had just woken up from nearly suffocating to death. Xiao Wang gently caressed Xiao Zhu's face before stating, "Let's get you to the hospital for a checkup to make sure you're all right. Although your dysphagia saved you this time, I'm not sure if any of the poison from that apple actually leaked out." Then, Xiao Wang Princess carried Xiao Zhu over to his car as another car finally arrived behind his. Two muscular men got out of the car behind them as they saluted. Xiao Wang nodded at them before commanding, "Take care of the children." Then, Xiao Wang drove off with Xiao Zhu, leaving the two bodyguards gawking. It didn't take long to reach the hospital where there was already a group of doctors arranged to welcome him. After a thorough checkout, Xiao Zhu was discovered to be fine as the minor amount of poison was not enough to cause any significant harm since she did not swallow the poison completely. Xiao Wang sighed in relief before he began to question Xiao Zhu regarding what happened. After learning the truth, Xiao Wang was enraged. Although Xiao Zhu tried to stop Xiao Wang from taking any drastic actions, he only replied, "Xiao Zhu, I know you are kind, but some people will never stop harming you unless they are gone. I want you to be yourself and stay kind for the rest of our lives. In exchange, let me be the one who shall take out the trash. Although the world will never run out of those with evil thoughts, let me protect you from them for the rest of our lives." Xiao Zhu gently smiled and nodded before leaning into Xiao Wang's embrace. A couple days later, the evil stepmother was sent to prison for attempted murder. Xiao Zhu reunited with her father as they discussed the wedding procedures. Not long after, the wedding bells tolled as 7 children tossed flowers onto the wedding carpet happily. The wedding between Xiao Zhu and Xiao Wang commenced. Not long after, the 7 children were adopted into the family as siblings of Xiao Zhu. They then grew up with the motto ingrained in them, being different does not necessarily mean a curse, as being different can save lives. Of course, they all lived happily ever after.